Since the dawn of its existence, humanity has looked up at the sky and asked that ancient question: are we alone in this vast universe? A question whose answer is terrifying either way. But humanity's endless curiosity and desire for discovery have always surpassed its fear, and ever since we first got the chance, we have been looking intently into the depths of the universe, in the hope of finding other life besides ourselves. From Galileo's first telescope to the first orbital satellites launched, from the James Webb Telescope, our most powerful cosmic eye, to the fast radio station in China with a half-kilometer diameter, we are searching for a sign from that deep darkness with all the means at our disposal, a single light to show us that we are not alone. But there is a beautiful saying: if you gaze long into the abyss will also gaze into you. And who knows, perhaps a foreign visitor coming to our system under extraordinary circumstances may have finally cast that first gaze from within the darkness towards us. Welcome to Finding the Truth. 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar object that entered our solar system in an unusual way in 2025, is actually not the first extraordinary situation humanity has faced. Our potential first encounter with the eyes in the darkness actually dates back much earlier. The year is 1977, a warm August night in Ohio. Astronomer Jerry Eman, working at the Big Ear Radio Telescope, one of the advanced radio telescopes of its time, discovered the presence of an extraordinary radio signal while examining hundreds of meters of printouts on which the telescope transcribed frequency waves detected from space. And in excitement, unable to decide what to write, he instinctively wrote "wow" next to the signal. And one of the biggest mysteries in astronomy goes down in history as the wow signal. The signal, which lasted for exactly 72 seconds, was detected at a frequency of 1,420 megahertz, which is the hydrogen line. This frequency, emitted by hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, is accepted as a universal communication channel for radio astronomers. And if an intelligent civilization like ours really wants to greet someone, it can make its presence known by specifically using this frequency in our universe full of infinite noise. The signal's bandwidth was 10 kilohertz, an extremely narrow band. In other words, it resembles a carrier wave specially produced artificially rather than natural formations. However, what made the wow signal so mysterious was that it was a one-time signal. It was as if someone in the Sagittarius constellation region had thrown a message in a bottle into the infinite depths of the universe with their last remaining strength, and we had accidentally heard that message. However, by the time the most powerful radio telescopes on Earth focused their attention on it, the message had already been lost in the infinity of space, and the signal from its source was cut off forever. Years passed, and hundreds of scientists, from organizations established to search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, to many countries, continued scanning space to find an answer, a fragment of life. And in 2015, Tabitha Boyajian, examining data from NASA's Kepler Space Telescope, discovered an interesting phenomenon. In the Cygnus constellation, 1,470 light-years away from Earth, in the star-coded KYC 8462852, which is now referred to as Tabby's star, there was an interesting light fluctuation. Normally, starlight is extremely constant. However, they experience strange fluctuations near the time of their death. But the situation here was different. Normally, when a planet passes in front of a star, it reduces the light emitted by the star by about 1%. However, in Tabby's star, this drop was around 22% and occurring in a completely irregular manner. This anomaly first brought to the minds of the scientific community the claim of the Dyson sphere, or Dyson swarm, introduced to our lives by American theoretical physicist Freeman Dyson. These theoretical structures mean that very advanced civilizations that have reached Type 2 level equip their system's star with billions of power stations to collect its energy in order to meet their unimaginably large energy needs. And this dense layer naturally causes a serious fluctuation in the star's light. Tabby's star was observed for years, and the most probable explanation concluded that there might be a dense dust cloud around the star caused by the fragmentation of a comet or a large moon. The underlying reason for this was that, despite the visible light decreasing, the infrared light could pass through that mysterious layer without diminishing. However, the possibility of a Dyson sphere or swarm has not been completely dismissed either. According to scientists, even if there is a 5% chance, there could still be a structure built by an advanced civilization there. While our telescopes were trying to search for a civilization far, far away from our solar system, something unexpected happened in October 2017. While humanity was wondering how to travel to the infinite depths in search of life, a traveler from those depths came right to our doorstep, and things suddenly got confusing. Mysterious signals were not the only things coming from the cosmos. Sometimes unexpected celestial objects take the stage and continue to surprise us. As a good example of this, a strange object, which we learned was the first interstellar visitor in human history, entered the solar system in October 2017. Oumuamua, meaning messenger from afar in Hawaiian, was discovered as it approached the sun and astonished everyone with its extraordinary characteristics. Oumuamua had an unusually long, thin shape, approximately 400 meters long and 40 meters wide. No known asteroid or comet had such a cigar-like structure. Furthermore, the telescope observations conducted showed neither a distinctive gas dust tail like a comet nor any chemical traces. Initially classified as an asteroid, Oumuamua was later reclassified as a comet due to a slight deviation, a mysterious acceleration detected in its orbit. Because this small thrust can be explained by the evaporation of ices heated by the sun pushing the object. However, the classic comet signs were still absent. This conundrum led to many speculations about Oumuamua's nature, and it was at this very moment that the world met astrophysicist Avi Loeb, who had a successful and quite rich career at Harvard University. Avi Loeb and his colleague Shmuel Bialy proposed an unusual hypothesis to explain Oumuamua's unconventional properties. What if this object is actually a light sail? That is, a spacecraft thin enough to be moved by the pressure of sunlight. According to Loeb and his team, this could be a deactivated piece of space debris sent by a distant civilization. For example, it could be a fragment of a light sail, or perhaps an active reconnaissance vehicle. Naturally, this was a radical claim and led to heated debates in the scientific world. Although Loeb did not speak definitively, he argued that the possibility of it being an alien spacecraft was noteworthy. And he suggested that the available natural scenarios were insufficient to explain the anomaly in Oumuamua. The majority of the scientific community, however, was more cautious about the event, and they began offering more normal explanations for Oumuamua, unlike Avi Loeb. A team led by Stephen Desch and Alan Jackson from Arizona State University showed in their detailed calculations that this mysterious object might actually be a nitrogen iceberg that broke off from the icy crust of a Pluto-like planet in another solar system. According to this theory, Oumuamua might be a fragment that was ejected from a planet's surface about 500 million years ago as a result of a collision, and it might have gradually thinned and flattened due to cosmic ray erosion throughout its journey. Since it was composed of nitrogen ice, it was calculated that as it approached the sun, it could have provided thrust by evaporating without leaving a visible trail behind. If you recall, there was a big stir in the media back then, with reports saying things like, "Alien ship has arrived." However, this curiously structured object, which silently entered our system, continued on its way without invading Earth and left just as it came into our lives. However, this time we are facing a massive structural and behavioral mystery. 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar object to enter our system. On July 1st, 2025, the Atlas telescope located in the Rio Hurtado region of Chile detected a faint point of light moving in deep space. It was quickly understood that this object, initially labeled with the provisional code A11PL3Z by automated software, was not an ordinary asteroid, because its orbit and speed were unlike any object we had seen before. When the orbital parameters were calculated, astronomers encountered a surprising fact. The object's eccentricity was much greater than 1. It was approximately 6.14. In celestial mechanics, objects with eccentricity between 0 and 1 trace elliptical orbits and are bound to the sun. Those with an eccentricity equal to 1 follow parabolic orbits, and those greater than 1 follow hyperbolic orbits. However, the 6.14 eccentricity of 3I/Atlas mathematically proved with certainty that it was not bound to the sun, but a visitor coming from infinity and going to infinity. It made a rapid entry into our lives as the third interstellar object discovered, after Oumuamua and 2I/Borisov. When I say rapid, it truly entered at an extremely high speed, at a tremendous speed of 68 kilometers per second. However, there are some interesting anomalies that cause the object to gain such prominence. For example, in August 2025, the Hubble Space Telescope, which was tracking the object, detected that the object was forming a tail in front of it, not behind or next to it as it approached the sun. Normally, as comets approach the sun, various frozen substances inside them begin to vaporize due to the heat. And this creates a dust tail behind the asteroid. The name comet actually comes from this. However, in 3I/Atlas, this tail was both in reverse and emerging straight without drawing any spiral. In other words, it was as if a spacecraft had turned on its reverse thrusters to slow down and was deliberately reducing its speed. But as eyes turned to the object, the anomalies began to increase instead of decrease. And once again, Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard, who built his career on the search for extraterrestrial life, appeared. Loeb and his team, examining the movements of 3I/Atlas, explained that as the object approached the sun, its speed began to increase and it started deviating from its normal gravitational orbit. The strange thing is that a tremendously large object like 3I/Atlas is thought to have a diameter of almost 10 kilometers. To accelerate like this, it should leave a gigantic dust cloud behind it. However, our asteroid, rather than being a natural satellite, behaved like an efficiently operating technological engine. In fact, it was tracing its route, leaving a very small trace proportional to its mass, exactly like an ion engine. The emergence of this claim is not without reason. As 3I/Atlas approached the sun, its color began to turn blue, when it should normally have been red. More accurately, the dust it emitted was glowing blue. This is an extraordinary situation for the following reason. Blue light emission occurs at very high temperatures, like in our advanced engines. However, Atlas had started to glow like this even when it was at a distance of 1.34 astronomical units from the sun. 1 astronomical unit, or 1 astronomical unit, gives us the distance of approximately 150 million kilometers between the sun and the Earth. Calculate accordingly. And in addition to all these extraordinary events, Avi Loeb took the stage once more and announced that, according to the orbital calculations they performed, they had discovered that Atlas's initial orbit was the point from which the Oumuamua signal, which I mentioned to you earlier, had come back in 1977. This announcement was the peak point of the matter. An unexplained object, which entered our system from the location of the Oumuamua signal, one of the most interesting mysteries in human history years ago, was moving extremely fast, strangely changing its speed and setting its course despite being enormous, and was bright and emitting blue light like an ion engine, was literally heading straight for us at full speed. And just as these anomalies piled up and all eyes were on NASA, an unexpected development occurred, and the American government shut down because the budget draft was not approved. And what happened next happened. When NASA's detailed data was suddenly cut off, a large information gap formed. And as you know, the universe abhors a vacuum. Unfortunately, in this case, conspiracy theorists dramatically started to fill that void. And by sharing so-called telescope images generated with artificial intelligence everywhere, they caused the situation to turn into a mess again. People sharing on X and Reddit at the beginning of November claimed that regular pulses containing the Fibonacci sequence were detected from Atlas at the 1420 MHz frequency. They further asserted that when the alleged message was deciphered, it carried a meaning along the lines of observe, prepare, understand, the gate awaits. In various forums and YouTube channels, many people started pumping out content to you based on Avi Loeb's claims and connecting the topic with ancient civilizations, saying things like, the old gods are returning, or the age of enlightenment is coming. In fact, the latest I saw was that some people had started filming strange content called 3I/Atlas Manifestation Enlightenment. I honestly congratulate them. An event could only be pushed to such an extreme. Fortunately, the American government reopened on November 12th, and the investigations conducted by the institutions also quickly started flowing. And naturally, data from the observation systems of other countries also began to emerge from within the huge pile of conspiracy. The Meerkat radio telescope located in the Karoo Desert of South Africa turned its 64-dish antennas towards 3I/Atlas, tracking it with its sharp eyes. The team led by Professor Pisano examined Atlas and, contrary to the claims on the internet, detected absorption lines at the 1665 GHz frequency. This meant the object's thermal expansion was active even at -43 degrees Celsius. This explained, to some extent, the emissions it made despite being far from the sun, and it proved that ices inside the object were melting. So, Atlas was not a silver-plated spacecraft, but a celestial object containing trapped water, which it was gradually emitting. And this slight evaporation also explained the small deviations in the object's orbit, because the same phenomenon had occurred in Oumuamua as well. The reverse dust-jetting phenomenon was not a reverse engine effect, as claimed by Avi Loeb. 3I/Atlas was releasing very coarse, approximately 100 micrometer-sized dust particles into its orbit, while solar radiation pressure pushed the fine dust away, forming the normal tail. These heavy and coarse particles remained suspended in its orbit because the object was large. And on Earth, because we were looking at the object's orbital plane at a specific angle, we saw this heavy dust mass appearing to stretch towards the sun due to a perspective effect. Let's get to the blue color phenomenon. This did not come from a plasma engine, but from the gas-dominant structure of the comet. It was determined that the object contained very little fine dust that reflects visible light, i.e., red and yellow color. In contrast, it was understood that it emitted large amounts of cyanogen and diatomic carbon. These gases fluoresce blue and green under sunlight. Since there was little fine dust, the red color could not mask this blue gas emission. That is why we saw the object glowing blue. The information that its orbit was the Cygnus constellation, where the WOW signal came from, is incorrect. In fact, the possibility that it came from the direction of the Hercules constellation seems much more probable, and the sky positions of the two are dramatically different from each other. 3I/Atlas is thought to have likely originated from the region of our galaxy called the thick disk, meaning the part where old stars are located. And this could actually explain its high speed. We are talking about a region with stars older than 7 billion years. There, the debris of the planet surrounding a star that has completed its lifespan may have been scattered into the universe at unimaginable speeds as a result of an explosion. This is an approach that can explain why Atlas is so large, yet so fast. However, none of this suggests that it is an insignificant rock. Yes, perhaps it's not a spacecraft, and perhaps your 3I/Atlas manifestation, as claimed on YouTube channels, won't open the door to a higher dimension for you. But the existence of such interstellar travelers, and especially the fact that they carry water, is very important for people researching how life might have begun on our planet. Because these types of asteroids may have carried the essential building blocks of life from those fragmented planets to us billions of years ago in their icy hearts. And when they collided with our planet, life may have begun in the planet's waters. This is, in fact, one of the most probable theories for the origin of life on Earth. So, in this situation, we are constantly searching for aliens in the depths of the universe. But if one day this theory is proven, it will ultimately turn out that the real aliens on this planet are us. Thank you all for watching the video. Always proceed with logic and science first on such topics, not with fantasies and forums or with artificial intelligence images. Rest assured, governments are searching for aliens much more than all of us. Millions of dollars are spent every year just on these observations. So, if such a situation truly occurs, we would hear these reports from hundreds of people, instead of Avi Loeb, who says aliens have arrived about every star or object that appears in space and is wrong every time. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.